How do you have a healthy relationship with food? Welcome, everyone, to the Cope and Chill podcast, where every Tuesday we explore practical approaches to self-care and self-healing for better emotional and mental health and well-being. I'm your host, Ron Martin. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching or listening on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you're listening via audio podcast, please leave us a comment. Doing these things will help our show to be seen and heard by more and more people and help us to get better all the way around. Have you ever thought about the relationship you have with food? And by relationship, what I mean is, how do we use food? How do you use food? Do you use it for strictly nutritional purposes? Or do you use food to soothe you, to comfort you after a stressful day or situation? Or does it in general bring you joy? What emotions show up in you before you eat, while eating, and after eating? And are you aware of those emotions and how they impact your decisions about the food you eat? For instance, do you feel the need to grab a donut, I'm guilty, or something else that you know isn't the most healthy for you because you're stressed out? Then you feel a sense of relief and enjoyment as you eat the donut. But then, when you're done, maybe you feel a bit guilty or even ashamed because perhaps you didn't just stop at one donut. And maybe it became a cycle. Well, today, we're going to talk about the struggles of emotional eating and how to have a more healthy relationship with food with certified holistic nutritionist Casey Weiss. In this episode, Casey shares some practical tips for how to stop the cycle of emotional eating and start to change your relationship with food for the better. Casey lives in Northern California, where she runs her practice called Your Case for Wellness. And she offers private and group coaching services primarily focused on helping women. After almost a decade of struggling with eating disorders and body image issues, she knew there must be a better way to approach health. This is what propelled her back to study nutrition. Casey focuses on working with women who are ready to stop the yo-yo struggle and finally make peace with food and their bodies. She helps women to learn to eat in a way that promotes overall health as well as weight loss. She found that what is missing in the health coaching space were coaches and programs that emphasized the importance of mindset and holistic behaviors in tandem with food and exercise. She now coaches women all over the world on how they can truly feel their best from the inside out and stress less about food so they can live their lives to the fullest. So join me today as we explore how to break the cycle of unhealthy and emotional eating so that you can show up feeling healthier, weighing less, and feeling better about yourself as a person. And as always, please like and subscribe or leave a comment wherever you're joining us from. Thank you. And now, here's Casey Weiss. Hey everyone, welcome to the Cope and Chill podcast. I'm Ron Martin, and I'm here with Casey Weiss, who is a holistic nutritionist. Thanks, Casey, for joining us. Let's start with what is a holistic nutritionist and how do you help people?
Thank you so much. And I'm so glad to be here. So, great question. A holistic nutritionist is someone who focuses not just on food. So much of what we think about with health and with dieting, it's just food. But when we take a step back, we recognize that our health and our wellness is so much more than just what we're eating. So my focus is on mind and body, and really understanding how that all interplays in your health, in your wellness, not just how you look, but how you feel.
Mm-hmm. Great. And then how do emotions play into the way we engage with food, the way we interact with food?
I love this question because this is something that I work with clients on all the time. And it's something that I myself had years of struggling with. So what I see so often are people going out, trying different diets, trying different things, and they're then frustrated with themselves because they're like, I tried this. They're like, it worked. Now I just need to go back to it. Well, if it worked, you wouldn't have to go back to it. You wouldn't keep yo-yoing. You wouldn't keep going on this cycle. And this happens with all of us. Like we've all, I'm sure, pretty much have been there. And the problem is we're not going into our emotional roots and the real reason why we're eating in the first place. Now, we all occupy a different spectrum in terms of the emotions that we have and how that impacts our food choices. Some people are very, very much emotional eaters, but we all emotionally eat sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
At times, if you have had a really bad day, you had that really bad breakup, whatever it was, obviously having that treat, it doesn't have to be a quote bad thing. But when it becomes a pattern and it is affecting you negatively for your health and for like psychological health as well, that's when we really, really need to take a step back and think, how can we approach this? So emotional eating and triggers can be everything from having a stressful day at work to your partner or friend saying something to you, to also sometimes always choosing to eat whenever there's something to celebrate. Oh, it's National Cookie Day. Oh, it's, I got this grade on a test, which again, to some degree doesn't always have to be negative. And we have to realize it's not our fault. Like ever since we were little, when we went to the doctor, you got a shot, you got a lollipop, right? We've been triggered into thinking that food always has to be reward and that in order to cope with an emotion, we can eat. The problem becomes when we are eating and we're not actually getting to the root of the emotional problem in the first place. Because then we're not solving, we're never actually diving to the root, we never getting to the real trigger. And as a result, the cycle perpetuates over and over. And we become frustrated with ourselves. Why did I eat this? Why did I do that? So we really need to get to the bottom of it if we want to achieve true health.
Yeah, and I think most people are aware of the flight or fight reactions that we tend to have in our body. It's sort of built into who we are as human beings, fight or flight. And even animals, all animals have this in there. But we also have this thing called rest and digest. Right. So there's this soothing aspect to eating food, which probably plays into, or probably not probably, it does play into why we emotionally eat, because it's soothing. It's a form of helping us to soothe ourselves. But so what happens in a person's mind when they're emotionally triggered? You mentioned emotional triggers. What happens as they're emotionally triggered?
I love the way you even said that question, because what you're talking about is the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic is that fight or flight. The parasympathetic is the rest and digest. So while it can feel soothing to eat, what often happens is we're eating out of stress. We're eating because we're scared. We're eating because we're upset, mad, insert emotion here. So we're eating when we're not in a parasympathetic state. Mm-hmm. We're eating in a state where we are on high alert, right? And as a result, this negatively impacts the way we're even able to digest our food. If we're not in that rest and digest mode, well, as a result, we can have certain digestive stressors. We'll notice more bloating. We'll notice like having complications with the food that we're eating. So I'm just going to give like a little,
right?
Yes, indigestion, 1,000%. So I'm just going to give like a little tip right here. I always suggest to people, ideally, you're in the most peaceful environment to eat, but like that's not reality. So if we can all put our hands on our belly and before we eat for 1 minute, deep belly breathe and really focus on getting the belly rest, that can really help us to activate our parasympathetic nervous system, get in that rest and digest state, and help us to like eat and digest our food. And we're not just what we eat, we're really what we digest. Because if you don't digest things properly, then it's not going to have the same benefit to you. So in terms of though, like more details with emotional triggers, this is something that does take time to understand. So this is why it can be helpful to maybe have a journal or just evaluate, instead of what we've done in the past is evaluate, like, let's put in my MyFitnessPal everything I'm eating. I suggest for people to instead write, what am I emotionally feeling every time I go down to eat?
Mm, mm.
Another thing that I find is really helpful, and it's tedious, but the point is that you've been doing this crap for a while and you don't want to feel this way anymore. So maybe you got to do something a little bit different to help uncover how you're really feeling and what the triggers are. So two things that can be really impactful. First of all, what is the environment in which you're eating? And a lot of people are like, I realize I'm always eating at my desk.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always eating during a meeting when I have this boss who stresses me really out. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
What's the environment that you're eating? And what are the emotions that you felt before and after?
Yeah.
Really important.
Yeah. And wow, that's very insightful. And I think, yeah, it puts you situationally in, it makes you more aware of your triggers, right? And the things that could be potentially driving you to actually seek the calming effect of eating food. Um, but there's this other aspect too, right? There's this, maybe we eat something to feel better. Maybe it's that giant piece of chocolate cake, or there's a place around where I live called Portillo's, and they serve this chocolate cake milkshake that has, like, I don't know, 1,500 calories in it, right? And I've had one of those in a very stressful moment. But I guess the thing is sometimes if we do that, we might feel the emotions of shame and guilt. How does that play a factor in unhealthy eating?
I like to refer to what I call my 10-10-10 rule. So it's not really a rule. This is the most rule you're going to get with me. But when you decide to eat something, think about how you're going to feel 10 minutes after you eat it, 10 hours, 10 days, 10 weeks, 10 months, right? So say, for example, you're having a celebration thing, or maybe not even a celebration. Maybe you're just like going out with your friend to have a bite to eat, and you guys decide to get some dessert and you have it. Generally speaking, if you're just like, you're splitting the cake or you're trying things, you don't wake up the next day, those 10 hours later, whatever, being like, I feel guilt and shame. We often feel guilt and shame associated with acts where we're alone and we're eating because of a negative emotional trigger. We have a negative emotion that leads to a behavior that leads to then more negative feelings, and it spirals more and more.
Yeah.
So we need to first understand, because a lot of times we're like, when I eat something bad, I'm going to feel guilty. But no, that's not really how it happens. We just have to think of situationally, in what ways can we reflect, I don't feel this negative emotion when I eat in this way. So clearly I don't have to just cut out all sugar. I don't have to cut out all carbs. I don't have to cut out. That's not my answer either. But how can I actually enjoy my food? Because you're not really enjoying your food if you feel icky like 10 minutes later.
Yeah.
So when you bring up guilt and shame, though, it just resonates so much with me. And I know with people I work with as well, because one thing, and it just happened 2 days ago, a client, I was asking her what she had for breakfast, just not out of like a, what'd you have for breakfast? Just like, what'd you have for breakfast kind of situation.
And that tone matters, right? Because that first
Yeah.
like something of shame, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Because we've been trying to work on having her, she's a school teacher, and we're trying to work on her having things more prepared so that she can have them for school. And she goes, I'm embarrassed, and she starts talking about something else. And I go, there's no need to have guilt and shame around food.
Yeah.
You came to me for a reason, right?
Right.
I said and I was explaining, like, truly the worst thing that you can do when you've made maybe like a little bit of an oopsie, right?
Yeah.
Is to have guilt and shame.
Yeah.
Because when you have guilt and shame about it, what does that trigger? That triggers you to feel, obviously, guilt and shame are negative emotions, objectively negative emotions.
Yeah.
And so what has your coping mechanism in the past been when you have guilt and shame? Probably eat even more. And then you have this cycle. So what I told her is, like, this is nothing to feel guilty or shame about. She ended up like going to the gas station and getting some things that she, didn't even feel good after.
Mm-hmm.
So what I said is, instead of this a learning experience, be like, how great is it that you're already being able to connect with your body and realize these foods that you were eating just a week ago, you realize you felt so much better when you had your overnight oats. Like, you like it. So let's just instead be like, oh wow, this is a learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
When it's actually a problem. And I notice this a lot with people say, oh, don't worry about it. No, it's not that you shouldn't think about it. You should think about it. It's just not, let's not dwell and have guilt about it, but let's use it as a learning experience. Let's use it to give us more fuel the next time. Let's use it as motivation. Let's not, though, like make ourselves get into this negative spiral of emotion. That's what's not serving us.
You know, and when we met last time, one thing you said, which really struck me as very interesting, very insightful, is you said our relationship with food is very reflective, or is reflective of many aspects of our lives. So in some ways, you kind of brought it home with that example where people, they may have this relationship with themselves where if they do something that they themselves don't approve of, they beat themselves up, right? There's that shame and guilt that they're applying to themselves. And so what it sounds like you're doing in that coaching moment is you're helping them to be a bit more forgiving and kind to themselves. So, you know, and how to move on from that rather than dwell on it and continue to beat yourself up over it. So how does food reflect, maybe beyond that example, how does food reflect the relationship with food that we have? How is it reflective of many of the other aspects of our lives?
So often people have a all or nothing mentality with food, and a lot of people that struggle with food have perfectionism, have people pleasing. So they're constantly trying to, please others. The energy that they're draining there, and like how that reflects then in their food choices. They are self-proclaimed perfectionists. So then they either are like on the diet or they're not off. They can't see a middle ground because they're either beating themselves up because I can't do it perfectly. I can't stay on the meal plan. I can't count all the macros, whatever it is. Or they're like perfectionists following it to a T. And it is just, again, like so reflective in that. And when we're talking about how we are treating ourselves and how we are approaching that, our wellness, I always like people to think about having a boss or having a teacher that was an a-hole. Okay. You had this teacher, this boss, and when they point out every single thing you did wrong, didn't though like help you to understand how you could improve, made you feel uncomfortable, made you feel crap about yourself, all these things. Were you motivated to change? No. But then think about that.
Not in a sustainable way.
Not in a sustainable
maybe
way.
to avoid the pain of continually being shamed in the near term, but not in the long term. No.
Exactly. But now let's think about like that teacher, that boss, that I'm not saying they were just like, oh, whatever you do, whatever, but they were like supportive. They cared for you. They helped you to grow. They pointed out some things that you could work on, but then also gave you some tangible skills. That's when you were able to really excel at that job or excel in that class. And it
helps you build confidence too, right? And you start to believe in yourself and trust yourself more in that environment. I think the first environment you described, you tend to doubt yourself and trust yourself less.
Yeah. Exactly. And though we don't recognize, and that's exactly what we do with ourselves in our health journey, we think that the more we beat ourselves up, that somehow magically it's going to click and we're going to all of a sudden be inspired. No. Yeah. And we need to recognize it just as how we would treat a child or treat our friend. Yeah. We need to do that for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, but see, that's the thing, especially in my generation, that may have been the way that we treat children, where you scold them, you shame them, right, out of bad behaviors. And so we kind of repeat.
I'm interviewing your kids later.
Yeah. I'm trying to grow and learn myself, but that's tends to be how we talk to ourselves, right? And the other thing is that you mentioned perfectionism versus like just giving up altogether, right? One extreme or the other. Both of those have emotional drivers, right? Perfectionism is about avoiding criticism, avoiding feeling shame from somebody else, and that you did everything right? And so that's what's going to help you avoid the pain that's going to come at you from someone that sort of points out your mistakes. And then the avoidance is, which is also the same as procrastination, which is also emotional, is I'm just going to give up altogether and avoid any pain and discomfort associated with this whatsoever. So I'm just going to back away from it. But in the end, what you talk about is having a healthy relationship with food. So what does a healthy relationship with food look like?
We often think of like kind of how I just started out with this conversation. Nutrition is just being food. What do we need to restrict? What's the latest thing that I'm not supposed to be eating? having a positive relationship with food is, first of all, not fearing it, being able to understand our hunger and fullness cues, being able to get in touch with our body, not neglect what we want, but also have a focus on nutrition for longevity and for something that's not just associated with weight loss. Now, I work with women, and the women who come to me, most of them do want to lose weight, and that's not a problem, but they need to recognize that our measures and what we focus on is primarily general health metrics, helping them balance their hormones, their blood sugar, things for longevity. And then as a result, they are able to lose weight, but our focus isn't like what to do to lose weight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That is not motivating long-term. We know the scale fluctuates day to day. We know that there's so many more important things about our health so that we can be able to be active parents and grandparents, so we can be able to be good friends, have good relationships, learn about our relationship with food so we can have better boundaries with the people that we are with, to be able to stand up for ourselves, have better confidence in dating, in our job, right? Like it truly is all interconnected. And now I'm honestly forgetting what the original question was because I was getting so excited.
Well, it was, I was really asking about what does a healthy relationship with food look like?
Oh, yes. So the thing is that there is a whole movement of intuitive eating, which I think of intuitive eating in it itself just works for you. That's fantastic. But intuitive eating is like the anti-diet movement. And while I am not for dieting, what I found personally, I dealt with struggles with body dysmorphia, with eating issues, I'll just say, for many years. And for me, when I went to intuitive eating, I still felt like it gave me a lot of principles to quiet the food police, to get out of diet mentality, but it still wasn't giving me enough tools to really understand how to fuel my body to feel my best.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want people to think that having a good relationship with food means just, oh, all food is equal. I can just eat whatever. It's fine. That's not also having a good relationship with food. Having a good relationship with food is thinking about how food makes you feel, making choices not just because of how you think you're going to look or because what someone said. It's being able to be intuitive with your own body. And I want to reiterate, this doesn't mean that you can't have health goals. It doesn't mean that you can't have aesthetic goals, but they need to be a place and coming from a place and motivation of overall health. So for me, my relationship with food was like, what's the lowest calorie thing I can eat? How can I be as small as possible? And it led me to eventually then like have crazy hunger and be like, I don't know what to do. Whereas now, and this is again, like what I help others with as well, is being able to listen to our body so that we can be able to have that cake and have that slice, or go to Portillo's and have that milkshake. But you know what? When you have a better, good relationship with food, you're able to have it and not finish it all. And it's not because you're like, I can't, I heard it has 1,500 calories. It's like, I actually noticed that my body doesn't feel good when I chug this whole thing. And I just want the taste of it. And so I'm going to have like maybe whatever I want of this, and then not wake up tomorrow feeling guilty about it either.
I think
So
something
it's nuanced.
yeah. And I think something that could help with that too. And I try to get my children to do this is mindful eating, which is making sure you taste your food, making sure you notice the texture of it in your mouth and how it goes down your throat, whether it's cold, whether it's hot, all these things, like what's the sensation of eating as you're eating it. And that helps you to slow down a little bit. And then by the time you're kind of, gotten maybe a third of the way through it, maybe you're full, maybe you're satisfied, and you've enjoyed what you need to enjoy and you don't need any more.
I love that you do that with your kids, because mindful eating and using our senses, something that we've gone so far away from. Like, what percent of people's meals do they eat just in front of a screen?
Yeah.
Right. And when you eat in front of a screen, no wonder why you overeat. Like, it's not your fault. You aren't paying attention to your food at all. Of course you don't know if you're full or not. Instead of getting mad at ourselves and saying, I can't believe I did this, why don't we like backtrack and be like, I didn't put myself in a good position to succeed. Right.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because actually I don't know that I'm that consistent with encouraging my kids to eat that way. I have tried it. Sometimes I get frustrated because, it's difficult, but we'll continue to try. But you talk about structure too, right? So how does having structure help people with, let's say, their emotional triggers, and how might how might that lead to healthier eating patterns and behaviors? And what do we
So
mean by structure? Yeah.
yeah. So why we go to diets in the first place, a lot of the reason why is because it gives us some type of safety, because it's some type of structure. We grew up our whole lives, and when adults told us whether or not we were good or bad. We got a grade. It told us what our ranking was, right? Like whether we made the soccer team or not, what string we were, whatever. We constantly were looking for others for validation to tell us what we should do, how we were performing.
Yeah.
And then we become adults and we're like, oh, I guess I got to figure some of this stuff out for myself, right?
Yeah.
I don't have mom or dad telling me what food and whatnot. And what ends up happening is that's why, like, the appeal of diets, because it's giving us set guidelines and rules, and to some degree that makes us feel safer.
Yeah.
We have this like little container, like, I'll stay within these boundaries, and then I know I'm being good, right?
Yeah.
I'm being good.
Yeah.
So what I find is really helpful is if I just, like, because again, I don't think it's not a great idea to label food as good versus bad. But at the same time, not all food is equal. It's not. Like, there's certain foods that are more health promoting than others, certain foods that are can make you feel better than others. But it doesn't mean that, again, like, you should have guilt or shame associated with that. But I don't like to provide a structure of like an eat this, not that situation. So what we want to do is instead find ways that we can create structure depending on the individual of structure where they need. So one of the first things that we'll work on is my balanced plate method, understanding how wherever you go, whether you're going out, whether food's being served to you, whether you're at home, how you can be able to create a balanced plate to incorporate things like protein, fat, and fiber-rich carbs. Instead of thinking of it as a restriction, being like, how can I be able to include those things? So how can we have some structure with food without it being restrictive, right? Another thing can be, how can we have structure with little things like creating a workout routine or creating a Google Calendar event for us every other day to work out. Or sometimes it's a little bit structured with mealtime. Now, I'm not a fan of a like, okay, it's 12 o'clock, you have to eat, because we do want to listen to our body. But also I've worked with a lot of people who work in a little childcare, who have, desk jobs or certain things where they have like a meal time, or have kids or families, whatever it is. So if we can be like, between the hour of this and this, but like maybe it's like a 2-hour window, we want to make sure we have our breakfast. And between these kinds of things, this can really help people to have structure within their day that also allows them to be like, okay, it's 11 and I always have my lunch, between 12 and 1. Maybe I don't actually want the donut that is in the break room right now, because I know I might have a really good lunch that's coming. And it's not from a place of, this is the key though. When I say that, it's like, well, you're supposed to listen to your body if you want. But that's not listening to your body. That's just the low-hanging fruit of the donut that's right there. And you realize that you haven't eaten in a couple hours, so eating the donut's going to raise your blood sugar. You're not going to feel great. You're not going to be able to be focused. And you have a really great quinoa salad or whatever it is, or really great sandwich that's waiting for you. So maybe have our lunch a little early, or if you're not really hungry, wait until, your regular lunch hour and have that. So we need to work with our natural inclinations as pack animals, right? Like as people members, and be able to understand that it's okay to want structure. Sometimes when we're like anti-diet, we're like, oh my God, we need to just do everything to be anti and not have structure. No, let's work with our natural inclination to want to feel that kind of safety with structure, but how can we provide structure in a way that's enhancing our nutrition, enhancing our lives?
Yeah. And, it's interesting in your example that you brought up, that I'm sort of seeing myself in what you're describing, because I think from my own personal experience, it seems that I might be craving that donut that's sitting there, but really what I'm finding is that that's really that I was ignoring the desire to eat prior to that. And my body is telling me that sugar is going to actually raise your blood sugar because you let it go too low in the first place. In other words, you didn't eat when you first got the cue to eat. Now your body's kind of in this, okay, we need something in here, that sugar is going to give you the quick boost. So go get that. As opposed to, well, if I was really paying attention when I was first hungry and I got the more balanced meal, that might help even out my blood sugar and help me feel better over the longer term. Just the thought that just came to me as you were describing that. But let's talk about, so how does the type of food, you mentioned protein, you mentioned fats, you mentioned fiber-rich carbs. How does the type of food you eat affect your emotions or moods?
Yeah. So one big thing that I like to discuss and teach is understanding how to balance our blood sugar. When we do not have balanced blood sugar, we get those energy like spikes, like, oh, like you were saying with the donut,
Mm-hmm.
and then crashes.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we have that, that obviously affects our mood, it affects our energy levels. It also is closely tied with our cortisol levels, our stress levels. Our blood sugar is closely related with that.
Yeah.
So we want to eat in a way that we're having a balance of macronutrients. And the three macronutrients, which people who like count macros are familiar with, are protein, fat, and carbohydrates. I'm not a fan of macro tracking because it really reduces food to just those macros. It doesn't, just like calorie counting, it doesn't actually get to the nuance and importance of food. It makes you obsessed with numbers in a way that I do not find helpful. However, it's great to understand like where you can get protein from, where you're getting, where you can get that. That's education that can be empowering versus overwhelming, restrictive. So the thing is that when we can eat in a way that allows us to have balanced blood sugar, that can really help to even out our energy and emotions. And also, we just find that the way that we eat, again, like kind of going back to that talk about guilt and shame, if we are eating certain foods that bring up certain emotions, that obviously also is going to be impacting our mood and our mental health.
What kind of foods? Like, so if, let's play this out a little bit. So if you eat a bunch of sugar and you get that sugar crash, you might be irritable afterwards, right?
Yep.
If you wait too long to eat, you might get hangry, right?
Mm-hmm.
So really working within the structure might help you stay in that sort of evenly balanced emotional zone a bit better. Is that fair to say?
Exactly. And so well, your earlier example of like wanting the donut because you let basically your blood sugar go too low, it's a prime example of your body is smart. Like the reason why that it wants the donut is because you got it to that point, or
Right.
maybe emotionally, whatever. It's eat in that your body realizes it's just is looking for instant gratification.
Mm-hmm.
And the instant thing would be the donut that has the quick energy source.
Mm-hmm.
It's not thinking about the 10-10-10 rule. It's not thinking about what will I feel like after. And so I always say, like, what's your after? Think about the after, not just the immediate. And when we can eat in a way that has balanced blood sugar, which the biggest thing I would say for that is really just not having carbs in isolation. We have sugar in isolation, we have carbs in isolation, and we don't have other macronutrients with them. This is what leads to the greatest blood sugar spikes.
Yeah. And that is advice that they give to, and even there's products out there on the market. You can debate about the healthiness of them that are designed for diabetics to even out, right? So you don't get, like you say, that sugar rush in and crash. It's balanced out with a protein or some kind of fibrous kind of product or something, or maybe even with fat, right? Something that takes longer and is harder to digest. So okay, so tell us, maybe you can give us a sense for if someone were to work with you, what might they expect from the experience? What have people said about the benefits of working with you?
Yeah. So when people, and as I said before, I work with women, when women come to work with me, one thing that we always have to start with is honestly the unlearning phase.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is we got to get rid of the diet culture crap that you've been taught. We have to really dig deep for a second and understand, oh, wait, I realize I don't eat this because my mom would say it would make me fat. I'm realizing that this is something, right? We need to uncover and unearth, and sometimes it's a little uncomfortable, and be able to unlearn, because if we don't recognize these things and we don't, then I'm very science-based. I'm very science and mindset-based. we need a, like, I provide the science of showing you, like, this is the actual truth. And then also, how does it make you feel? We need to go from both approach, which mindset is also has science backing, of course. But
Yeah, sure.
so we work on that. Now, one of the first things that I do with my clients, even before our first calls, is I ask them to provide me pictures of what they're eating. I find pictures is a lot less invasive than like having to write everything down. And that way I can have a good understanding of like the types of foods they're eating. And I say, it's no judgment, because it really isn't. That's why they're coming to me, right? It's so we can then from there understand where they may be nutritionally deficient, where they could be really adding things in, all within the addition mindset. That's a big thing with me. How can we add in? Naturally, when you add in certain things, and you're going to edge out certain of the other things, but we don't have to focus on that. What we focus on is the addition mindset, not operating out of scarcity. So I work with very much understanding, like, how can we make tactical nutritional changes? Because women love it. Like, they love having a little bit of more of that structure. Again, they come to me because they don't want to be dieting anymore, but they're so comfortable with that being the structure. So how can we create a little bit of structure, really understand, use nutrition and what nutrition will work for their bodies. Also, really, like, specifically with hormones too. Female hormones are very much more complicated than men's hormones. So there's a lot more nuance there. And then really working on understanding throughout that process, the mindset and the emotional triggers throughout. So, like, for example, my private clients, they have messaging access to me, 7 days a week. So they're able to make these revelations and work on these things and be able to, in real time, come up with, like, be able to understand what may be going on, or workshop through that. And even in, like, my other programs, I provide tools of how you can be able to understand what those triggers may be, because that's a big thing too, just the education piece. Like, I'll say things about, for example, educating about the all or nothing mentality, the idea of, you're on or you're off. Like, oh my God, that's me too. I'm like, yeah, this is a psychological phenomenon. It's called whatever. Like, you're not crazy, but how can we then reorient our thinking so that we can work beyond that?
Awesome.
And you asked, though, one thing you did ask, like, what do people come away with? It's definitely really having a healthy relationship with food, feeling like they can go out and travel and be able to eat in a way that actually feels good, is aligned with their values, be able to balance their hormones, balance their blood sugar, be able to lose weight in the process without focusing on weight, have more energy, have more vibrance, and have better relationships as a result. These are all things that I receive in terms of messages from my clients, and it just makes me so happy that it's about so much more than just how they look. It's about how they're really feeling and how it's positively impacting their lives.
Well, it's empowering and freeing as well, right?
Yeah.
So this has been awesome, Casey. I really appreciate you being on the show. You've been very informative, and I think the information you shared has been very helpful and practical. Tell us how people can connect with you, how they can work with you or seek out working with you if they'd like to.
Well, first off, thank you for those kind words. I've loved chatting with you as well. So the best way to kind of follow me is on Instagram. I am Your Case for Wellness. So you can chat with me there, send me a message, or
and we'll
whatever
have the
you want.
link in the show notes too.
Okay, perfect. And there I also have, I think I'll have that in the show notes too, probably, maybe not, but a link to my offerings. So I currently have just a few slots open right now for private coaching, which is my 3-month coaching container. I have a wait list for my group coaching program. And I also have a course that I came out with my friend who is a prenatal fitness specialist, where we talk all about and have a whole course dedicated to having your healthiest pregnancy. I'm actually currently pregnant too. So I'm going through it right now. So from firsthand experience, I've been even like following my own course along. So really just wanted to be able to provide another avenue for people, because obviously nutrition through pregnancy, we want to work on a relationship with food, but it's about a lot. There's a lot more nuance there. So wanted to help my clients. I saw a lot of my clients like getting pregnant and being able to provide another resource for them as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I truly believe that our listeners are going to get a great deal from this chat. I think even the men too can learn something here. But thank you again for your time. It was truly wonderful chatting with you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you were able to take some inspiration or something of value from today's show. To access all of the resources and links mentioned, please head on over to copeandchill.com or our video-based podcast on our YouTube channel at Cope and Chill, where you will find the show notes for today's episode. That's Cope and Chill, CopeandChill.com. And for information about upcoming episodes, check us out on Instagram at Cope and Chill. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you're joining us from YouTube, and leave a comment wherever you're joining us from. Please come back and join us again for next week's episode. But until then, take care of yourselves.